The hall was already half filled when the Marine entered quietly through the side door. Nobody noticed him at first. He moved slowly, like a man who had carried weight for many years, not the weight in his hands, but the weight on his heart. His old Marine jacket was faded, the color almost washed away, but the pride in his walk was still there. He looked around, searching for the best place to sit, not too close, not too far, just somewhere he could see his son clearly. For a moment, he stood still, letting the atmosphere of the graduation hall settle inside him. He had waited for this day for so long. In front of him, families were talking, laughing, taking pictures. Some were excited, some emotional. But the Marine remained silent, with only one thought in his mind: his son. His boy, who once held his little hand, was now walking into a new life. He found an empty seat in the back row and quietly sat down. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody knew what he had survived. Nobody knew the stories behind the scars on his hands. He looked ordinary, maybe even tired, but he was a man who had once faced storms, deserts, and battlefields far away from home. The Marine closed his eyes for a few seconds. His memories took him back to the day his son was born. The tiny fingers, the first cry, the gentle promise he made to always protect him. But life had its own plans. He had been deployed many times. He missed birthdays, school events, and family dinners. He had held guns instead of toys, slept in tents instead of rooms, and run toward danger when others ran away. He always worried his son might not understand why he was gone so much. He always wondered if he was doing the right thing. Today was his chance to make up for everything he had missed. Today, he wanted to be there fully, proudly, as a father, not as a Marine, not as a soldier, but as a dad. On the stage, banners and lights were being arranged. Teachers were preparing their speeches. Students walked around in their graduation gowns. The Marine smiled softly. He imagined his son wearing that same gown, standing tall, future shining bright. The thought warmed his heart. He kept checking the time, tapping his fingers on his knees. He wasn't nervous for the ceremony. He was nervous for the moment when his son would look into the audience and see him. Would he smile? Would he be surprised? Would he feel proud? Suddenly, someone brushed past him and gave him a quick look. A mother sitting nearby frowned at his old jacket and then turned away. A couple whispered something quietly, glancing at him. He heard their whispers but ignored them. He was used to silence. He was used to judgment. People always saw the uniform, never the man inside it. But he didn't come here for them. He came for only one person. He leaned back in his seat and watched the staff set up the stage. He imagined cheering loudly when his son walked, though he knew he might stay quiet, because years of discipline had taught him how to control emotions. Still, deep inside, his heart beat faster with every passing minute. The Marine did not know that this peaceful moment would not last long. He did not know that 2 guards had been watching him from across the hall. He did not know that his simple presence, his silent pride, his old jacket, all of it was about to be questioned. He only knew that he was a father waiting to celebrate his son. He did not expect trouble. He did not expect disrespect. He did not expect anyone to stop him. But life sometimes tests even the strongest hearts. And on this important day, the Marine was about to face a test he never imagined. A test not on a battlefield, but in a graduation hall. A place where he hoped for peace, but where chaos was already walking toward him. The Marine sat quietly in the back row, unaware that 2 pairs of sharp eyes were fixed on him. While everyone else in the hall focused on their families, the 2 security guards near the entrance were watching the man in the faded jacket. They whispered to each other, pointing in his direction every few minutes. At first, it seemed harmless, but their expressions slowly changed from curiosity to suspicion. One guard, a tall man with a stiff jawline, narrowed his eyes. "Did he check in?" he muttered. The second guard shook his head. "I didn't see him." "You?" "No," the tall guard replied. "And look at him. He doesn't look like a parent." They did not know who he was. They did not know what that old Marine jacket meant. All they knew was what they assumed. The tall guard crossed his arms. "This event is only for registered families. We can't let random people walk in." His partner nodded. "Let's go check." At that moment, the Marine was looking at the stage with hopeful eyes. imagining the moment his son would appear. He felt calm and proud. He had no idea that trouble was slowly walking toward him. No gunshots, no battlefield. Yet something inside him sensed tension building in the room. The two guards began walking through the rows, their footsteps firm and cold. Some people turned their heads, wondering what was happening. A few parents noticed the guards' eyes locked on the Marine and began whispering. "That man again. I thought he looked strange. I hope he is not here to cause trouble." The Marine heard some of the whispers, but he kept his eyes on the stage. He had learned long ago that silence was more powerful than argument. He had survived missions where every second meant life or death. A few whispers could not shake him, but the guards didn't stop. They reached the back row and stood right in front of him. The tall guard cleared his throat sharply. "Sir," he said in a firm voice, "may we see your entry pass?" The Marine slowly looked up. His face showed no fear, only calm confusion. "Entry pass," he repeated quietly. "Yes," the guard replied, his tone slightly rude. "Only approved guests are allowed inside. Do you have permission to be here?" The Marine blinked. "My son is graduating today. I came to watch him." The second guard scoffed. "Everyone says that." He leaned forward, inspecting the Marine's jacket. "Where did you get this?" "A costume shop." The Marine's chest tightened. He wasn't angry, just surprised. He had worn this jacket with pride for years. He had bled in it, slept in it, survived in it. And now someone was calling it a costume? "I served," the Marine said softly. "This is my uniform." The guards exchanged doubtful looks. The tall one said, "Look, sir, we aren't here to argue. You need to show your pass or step outside." A few people in the nearby rows fell silent. They turned to watch. Some were curious, others amused. They didn't know him. They didn't know the truth. They just watched like he was a scene in a drama. The Marine sighed. "I don't have the pass. But my son is graduating. His name is—" "We don't need his name," the tall guard interrupted. "We need you to leave. Now." The Marine stood up slowly. He didn't raise his voice, didn't argue. His training had taught him discipline. But deep inside, he felt something breaking, something painful. He looked toward the stage one last time, hoping his son wouldn't see this moment. But the guards didn't let him think. One of them stepped closer, touching his arm. "Sir, let's go. Don't make this harder." The hall grew strangely quiet. The air felt heavier. A few people recorded the scene on their phones. Some shook their heads at him without knowing anything about him. The Marine felt the world turning unfair again. He had fought for people who now couldn't even give him respect. But before he could take a single step, the hall doors suddenly swung open, and the sound of heavy footsteps began echoing inside the room. Something big was about to happen. The Marine stopped moving when the doors slammed open behind him. The sound echoed through the hall like a sudden thunderclap. Every head turned. Conversations died instantly. Even the two guards shifted uneasily, their hands dropping from the Marine's arm. The Marine looked over his shoulder slowly. He saw 6 silhouettes standing at the entrance. Tall, strong, silent. Their steps were heavy, calm, and perfectly in sync, steps only trained soldiers walked with. 6 Navy SEALs had entered the graduation hall. At first, no one understood why they were here. A few people thought they might be part of some special ceremony. Others whispered, confused and nervous. The room felt different now, like the air itself sensed something important was about to unfold. The 6 SEALs walked forward in a straight line, their boots hitting the floor with steady rhythm. Their faces were serious, their eyes sharp. But their focus was not on the crowd, not on the stage, not on the teachers. Their eyes were locked on one person, the Marine. When the guards realized this, their confidence started to shake. The tall guard straightened himself, but his jaw tightened. The second guard swallowed hard. Both of them stepped slightly away from the Marine, unsure of what was happening. The Marine stood still, his hands lowered by his sides. Something inside him recognized that walk, that energy, that discipline. He had once trained men like these. He had once walked with the same silent power. He didn't know what they were doing here, but he could feel respect in their gaze even from a distance. As the SEALs approached, the whispers in the hall grew louder. Are they looking for someone? Why are they walking like that? Is something wrong? Who are they here for? A little girl whispered to her mother, Mom, they look like heroes. Her mother nodded without taking her eyes off them. By now, the 6 SEALs stood only a few feet away from the Marine. The guards backed up even more, confused and nervous. The tall guard tried to pull himself together and asked harshly, excuse me, this is a school event. Who are you all? But none of the SEALs answered him. Instead, the man in front stepped forward. He was the tallest of them, broad-shouldered, with a calm but commanding presence. He looked straight at the Marine, straight into his eyes. And in that moment, something flashed between them. Not fear, not confusion, but recognition. The crowd held its breath. Slowly, the lead SEAL lifted his right hand and saluted. A strong, perfect military salute. The hall froze. The Marine's eyes widened, not in pride, but in surprise. He had never expected this. Not here. Not today. Not in such a public place. The man standing before him was not just any SEAL. He was one of the soldiers the Marine had once guided on missions, trained with, fought alongside. The lead SEAL lowered his hand and spoke. His voice was deep, steady, filled with emotion that only a soldier could hear. Sir, we heard you might be here. We came to stand with you. The second guard blinked rapidly. Yes, sir. Stand with who? The SEAL ignored him. He turned to the crowd, his voice louder, clearer. This man, he said, pointing gently toward the Marine, is not a stranger. He is not a problem. He is not someone who should be asked to leave. Every sound in the hall vanished. Even the smallest rustle of paper stopped. He is a Marine who saved lives. Many of them. The Marine felt his throat tighten. He had never spoken about his missions. He never told his son details, never talked about the battles. He believed doing good didn't need applause. But now, the truth was walking toward him whether he wanted it or not. Another SEAL stepped forward and spoke, his voice trembling slightly. We owe our lives to him. If it were not for him, some of us standing here would not be standing at all. People gasped softly. The guards looked small now, confused and embarrassed. Parents exchanged shocked glances. Students sat straight, listening closely. The Marine shifted uncomfortably. He had never liked attention. But this moment wasn't in his control anymore. The room waited, silent, still. And in that silence, one question rose in every mind. Why was a hero asked to leave his own son's graduation? The answer was about to shake the entire hall. The hall stayed frozen as the 6 SEALs stood around the Marine like a protective circle. No one spoke, no one coughed, no one even adjusted their seat. It felt like time had paused. Only the Marine's heartbeat echoed in his chest, slow but heavy. The lead SEAL stepped one pace forward. He looked at the Marine the way a soldier looks at a commander he trusts with his life. Sir, he said again, but this time his voice carried emotion, you should not stand in the back. You should not be treated like this. The Marine looked down, uncomfortable. He never liked praise. He preferred silence, simple moments, and peace, something he rarely found during his years in service. The tall guard tried to save himself. Look, we didn't know who he was, he said quickly. He didn't show a pass. The SEAL turned his head slightly and fixed him with a cold stare. You don't need a pass to respect someone, he said calmly. And especially not this man. Gasps passed through the audience. A teacher dropped her file. A student sat up straighter. All eyes returned to the Marine. The lead SEAL lifted his hand, pointing at the Marine's jacket. You see that, he said. To you, it looks old. Maybe dirty. Maybe simple. But to us, this jacket represents battles you cannot imagine, nights without sleep, missions in enemy territory, and a man who never backed down. The Marine shifted uncomfortably. He didn't want his past exposed like this. He didn't want glory, not today. Today was for his son. But the seal wasn't done. He trained us, guided us, saved us. The seal's voice cracked slightly. Some of us standing here, we are alive because of him. Behind him, one seal lowered his head. Another clenched his jaw to hold back emotion. The Marine felt his throat tighten. He remembered the mission they were talking about, one that nearly cost him everything. But he never told anyone because he believed heroes were the ones who came home. Not him. The hall's atmosphere shifted. People who once judged him now looked ashamed. Parents who whispered before were silent with guilt. Even the guards looked smaller, like children caught doing something cruel. The second guard tried to defend himself. How were we supposed to know? He looked, alone. One seal stepped forward sharply, his boots hitting the floor with force. Being alone doesn't make him less, he said. Being quiet doesn't make him suspicious. And being humble doesn't make him unwanted. The Marine closed his eyes briefly. He had lived his whole life with humility. But today, that same humility led to humiliation. The seals looked at him with deep respect. The crowd looked at him with growing shame. But the Marine didn't want pity. He wanted fairness. He finally spoke, his voice low but steady. I only came to see my son. The words were simple, but they carried a lifetime of pain. The hall felt that pain. The lead seal nodded. And you will see him. Not from the back. Not from the corner. You deserve the front row. The Marine shook his head gently. That's not necessary. But the seal smiled softly, something rare for a soldier of his stature. It is necessary, he said, because we know what you've done. And today, everyone else will know too. A sudden voice came from the stage. Dad. Everyone turned. The Marine's son stood there in his graduation gown, his eyes wide and filled with shock, confusion, and emotion. He had seen everything. He had heard everything. And now, he was walking toward his father, forgetting the ceremony, forgetting the program, forgetting everything except the man who raised him. He came down the steps slowly at first, then faster, then finally almost running. The guards stepped aside quickly. The son reached his father and stopped only a foot away. He looked at the 6 seals surrounding him, then at the man he always knew as simply, Dad. Is all this true? He whispered. The Marine didn't know what to say. But the seal answered for him. Yes. Your father is a hero. The son's eyes filled with tears. The hall waited, breathless. What the Marine's son did next would change the entire ceremony. The Marine's son stood trembling in front of his father. His heart was beating so fast he could barely hear anything else. For years, he had known his father as a quiet man who worked hard, spoke little, and disappeared into deep thought sometimes. He never understood why his father would stare at old photos or wake up suddenly at night. He never understood the heaviness behind his father's smile. But standing there, surrounded by 6 Navy SEALs honoring the man he called Dad, everything finally made sense. The son wiped his eyes and whispered again, Dad, why didn't you ever tell me? The Marine looked down, unsure how to answer. The truth wasn't something he liked talking about. He never believed children should carry the burdens of war. He wanted his son to live freely, without fear or stories of violence. I didn't want you to see me that way, the Marine said softly. I wanted you to have a normal childhood. The son swallowed hard. But I should have known who you really are. You knew, the Marine replied gently. I am your father. That's what matters most. The son's eyes glistened with pride and pain at the same time. Behind them, the SEALs stood tall, silent as stone, giving space to the moment. People in the hall watched with wide eyes. Some wiped tears. Others looked down, ashamed of how quickly they had judged the man in the old jacket. The tall guard stepped forward awkwardly. Sir, we didn't know. We didn't mean to. But the son cut him off with surprising strength. You didn't need to know who he was, he said. You just needed to treat him like a human being. The guard's face flushed red. He had no excuse left. The second guard lowered his head, avoiding everyone's eyes. The principal hurried down from the stage, nervous and embarrassed. He cleared his throat. "I am so sorry, sir. We had no idea." One SEAL turned slowly and stared at him. "You didn't need an idea," he said. "You needed respect." The hall remained silent. Every person felt the sting of those words. The principal swallowed hard. "You are right," he whispered. Then he turned toward the Marine and said louder, "Sir, please, would you allow us to honor you properly? You deserve more than just an apology." The Marine shook his head. "Today is not about me. It's about my son." But his son disagreed. "No, Dad. Today is about everything you sacrificed for me. I wouldn't be here without you." He grabbed his father's hand gently and led him toward the front row. The SEALs followed behind them like guardians. The audience moved aside, creating a path. Every step the Marine took felt heavy with memories. Missions, brothers he lost, days he survived, nights he questioned if he'd ever see home again. He never thought any of it would matter in a school hall. When they reached the front, the principal spoke into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue the ceremony, we want to acknowledge someone special in this hall. Someone who served this country with courage and honor. Someone who saved lives, including the lives of the men standing behind him today." The Marine shifted uncomfortably. He didn't like the spotlight. He didn't like applause. But sometimes, the truth demands to be seen. The principal continued, "Today, we honor a father, a Marine, and a hero." The entire hall rose. Slowly at first, then completely. A full standing ovation. Clapping filled the room. Louder. Stronger. Echoing like rolling thunder. The Marine closed his eyes. Not because he enjoyed the applause, but because he remembered the faces of the ones who couldn't come home. He remembered their laughter, their bravery. He wished they could be here instead. His son leaned toward him and whispered, "Dad, I'm proud of you." The Marine opened his eyes, tears quietly gathering. "I'm proud of you too." Just then, a teacher called the next graduate's name. It was his son's name. The hall erupted in cheers as the Marine's son walked onto the stage, not as just another student, but as the son of a hero. But the most powerful moment was still to come. What happened next would silence the hall in a way no one expected. The Marine's son walked onto the stage, but this time the applause felt different. It wasn't just for him, it was for every sacrifice his father had made silently for years. His hands shook a little as he accepted his diploma, but his heart felt stronger than ever. He turned toward the crowd and saw his father standing in the front row, surrounded by 6 Navy SEALs. That image alone made his eyes shine with tears. The principal stepped aside respectfully, giving the boy a moment to breathe. The son held his diploma tightly and glanced at his father with a proud smile. But then something unexpected happened. The lead SEAL stepped forward and raised his hand slightly. "Wait," he said in a calm but powerful voice. The whole hall went silent again. Everyone watched as all 6 SEALs moved to the stage and stood behind the young graduate. Their presence alone was enough to freeze the moment. The son looked confused, but he trusted them, because they respected the man he respected most. The lead SEAL leaned into the microphone. "This young man," he began, "is standing here today because his father taught him strength without ever speaking about it. He taught him honor without showing medals. He taught him courage by living quietly." The Marine shifted uncomfortably. He didn't want praise. He didn't want a ceremony. He just wanted to watch his son graduate. But life had a way of giving him more than he asked for. The SEAL continued, "Today is his son's graduation. But for us, this is also the graduation of a father's sacrifice. A sacrifice that deserves more than a seat in the back." People nodded quietly, touched by the moment. The SEAL looked at the Marine and said, "Sir, please join your son on stage." The Marine froze. He had never walked onto any stage. He had never stood in front of a crowd. He had never shown his pain or pride publicly. But his son looked at him with hopeful eyes and whispered, "Please, Dad, come." That was enough. The Marine took a small breath and walked to the steps of the stage. The hall watched every movement. He climbed each step slowly, like climbing toward memories he had locked away for years. When he reached the top, his son grabbed his hand and pulled him closer. The Marine stood there, in front of hundreds of people, unsure of what to do. But then something incredible happened. The 6 seals turned toward him and saluted. A deep, synchronized, powerful salute that shook the entire hall.